Efren Reyes dominated all games for 30 years. Rotation, 9-ball, 10-ball, 3-caution, snooker. Well, come on now, he was never one of the best at 3-caution. Wait, was he? Let's find out. Okay, so today I want to try to understand how good Efren Reyes really was at 3-caution carom. I'm gonna look at facts and only facts, because when someone becomes a legend like Efren Reyes has done, a lot of stories get blown out of proportion, or get distorted and through the years almost become urban legends. Alright, first let's go back to the late 70s. Around 1976-77, Efren was dominating the pocket billiard games so much in the Philippines that he couldn't find anyone to play him for money anymore, so he switched to 3-caution carom and started to play the older generation who was playing that game. But once again, Efren became so good at 3-caution that after some time, nobody wanted to play him at this game either, and he decided to switch back to pocket billiard. That story tells us that Efren was probably the best 3-caution carom player in the Philippines around that time. So that already confirms that he was good, but it doesn't mean that he was great, and it definitely doesn't mean that he was world class. Because you've got to understand that the level of carom players in the Philippines wasn't great at that time. There wasn't a single Filipino amongst the top players in the world. In the late 70s, in the Philippines, the game's popularity was actually in decline, and carom was basically a dying game. Everybody was playing rotation back then. Efren was actually quoted saying, "All the carom players are dead now," and that's why he switched back to pocket billiards. So now we've established that Efren was a national level 3-caution player, but in a country with a fairly low level of competition. Fast forward to 1983. We are now in the USA, where Efren has started to crush the competition in pocket billiards, making a name for himself outside of the Philippines. But it looks like he's still enjoying 3-caution, because that year, in '83, he played the US Open 3-caution in Chicago. He didn't do well in the main tournament, but he did manage to win a side event, beating Allen Gilbert in the final. Now this is fairly impressive because Allen Gilbert was one of the top players in the US at the time, and also because Efren averaged 1 on his way to winning that side event. For people who are not familiar with the game of 3-caution, averaging 1 means that you score on average 1 point per inning. And as a rule of thumb, you could say that between 1 and 1.5 is national level, between 1.5 and 2 is world class, and 2 and above is an on-form world class player. So he won a tournament, he beat one of the top US players at the time, and he averaged 1 in the process. All those facts put together once again confirm that he was a very good player, definitely national level, but it still doesn't prove that he was great nor world class. Another fact I looked into is that in the 80s, 90s, 2000s and 2010s, he continued to play carom from time to time, as he often represented the Philippines at the SEA Games, the Southeast Asia Games. Over the years playing in that competition, he did win a few carom medals, but once again, putting things into context, it's important to realize that the level of carom players in this competition isn't amazing, and Efren was able to compete with the field while barely averaging 1. And like I said before, averaging 1 is really good, but it wouldn't be anywhere near enough against the top players from Europe or Korea. And keep in mind that the field at the SEA Games are not deep at all. With just 16 players, it doesn't take much to finish 3rd and get a bronze medal, for instance. During his long career, Efren Reyes actually played some of the best 3-caution players, so I also had a look at those matches. At the Japan Cup in 2002, Efren actually beat Torbjörn Blondell out of the tournament, and Torbjörn is one of the best 3-caution players ever. So that result is crazy impressive, until you realize that it was a race to 7 and Reyes had the opening shot. A race to 7 in 3-caution is just not enough to mean anything. It's probably the equivalent of winning a race to 2 in 9-ball. The match literally took less than 8 minutes. Now, Torbjörn and Efren had met before in an exhibition match. Back in 1997, they had played a challenge in which they competed in a game of 3-caution and 9-ball. And you'll be surprised to hear that Torbjörn actually beat Efren in both games. He won the game of 9-ball 9-5, but more importantly, he won the game of 3-caution 30-20 in 20 innings. That means he averaged 1.5, while Efren averaged 1. Then in 2012, 15 years later, they had a rematch, this time playing 10 ball and 3 caution. Efren crushed the 10 ball game 8-2 in less than 45 minutes, but he also got destroyed at 3 caution on the score of 35-12 in only 13 innings, 12 innings for Efren. So Torbjorn averaged almost 3, which is just amazing, while Efren averaged 1 once again. Now going back to 2002, Efren played another legend of the 3 caution game in Semi Sejine. It was just an exhibition match, but Efren lost 15-5, with Sejine averaging 1.5 while Efren averaged 0.5. So looking back at all this, what do we know? We know he was good enough to be a national player, we know he was good enough to average 1, and we also know that every time he played a top 3 caution player, he lost, except for that one time he played a ridiculous race to 7. But to be fair to Efren, we also need to keep in mind a few very important facts. Number 1, he played all of his 3 caution games using his pool cue. Number 2, he practiced the game only once or twice a year, maybe at the most. Number 3, in his own words, he played his best 3 caution back in the late 70s when there was still some money to be made in the Philippines, and after that he simply never really tried. Number 4, he had no financial incentive to take the game more seriously and try harder. Back in '83, when he won that side event in Chicago, some European world-class players who saw him play actually asked him, "Why don't you commit more to the game of 3 caution?" And Efren just laughed and replied, "No money in Cairo." So, in conclusion, yes, he was a very good 3 caution player. When you compare him with other pool players, you can probably consider him the best ever 3 caution player amongst those guys. But when compared with 3 caution top players, I'm afraid he has never done anything to really prove that he even belongs in the same category. So no, he most certainly did not dominate 3 caution. That's just ridiculous. But it's true, he did average 1 without even trying, and we can assume that he never reached his ceiling in 3 caution. So we don't really know how good Efren could have become if there was more money in the sport. But that's just ifs, not facts.